Favorite Stages on the Sega Genesis was a series of videos I really enjoyed making. There are so many memorable titles on the platform, it's a treasure trove of potential content. But before I pay a visit to the old Genesis again, we are going to take a right turn down Saturn Lane. That's right, Sega fans, we are going to talk about some of my favorite stages on the Sega Saturn. There are a ton of games to consider here, from arcade-accurate fighters to kick-ass shoot-em-ups to a ton of action and adventure offerings. With the Saturn being my favorite Sega system of all time, I have so many memories wrapped up in these titles, and have played them fairly regularly over the last 25 years or so. Picking a handful to start was still no easy thing, mainly because there is so much to consider it becomes quite overwhelming. To help me out, Joe from GameSack volunteered some of his favorite stages to get this series started proper. So in this episode, you get two Sega guys talking up 10 games for the beloved Saturn. This one has been a long time coming, so let's get started. In June of 1995, my friends and I imported Shinobi for our Japanese Saturns. This would be released in the US later that year as Shinobi Legions, and then as Shinobi X in PAL regions. I never gave a rat's ass about the story or the full motion video cinematics, and I always felt that the digitized visuals were not the proper direction for the series, but I always loved the gameplay, and it was stage 1 that really let you run wild with all your ninja badassery. You could easily deflect enemy projectiles, swiping them back in the direction they came. The stage layout also allowed you to take advantage of your block, melee attacks, and spinning jump to just rip through your opposition with ease. I also loved the look, a small village set against a moonlit sky. This stage, this gameplay, these characters, and everything in between seemed the most like Shinobi in the entire game. Whenever I play this today, I often crush this stage a few times and then turn it off because nothing else gets as good as it does right here. Now, I'm not saying this isn't worth playing all the way through, but once you do, you may find you feel the exact same way. The level even ends with a boss encounter that feels ripped straight away from one of the Genesis titles. The Japanese and US editions featured the same soundtrack, but for something different, give the PAL version a go.
Manx TT is such an amazing racing game. There are just so many stages to pick from, how can I possibly choose a favorite? Oh wait, there are barely even 2 stages here. Actually, more like 1.5. Screw this, let's do a much more interesting game. Daytona USA has a lot of special memories for me. The Saturn surprised me and a hell of a lot of other people with its launch, and I brought the console home that day with this game, Panzer Dragoon, and of course the Virtua Fighter pack-in. Sure, you can barely see 50 feet in front of you, and the frame rate is less than ideal. That doesn't mean it isn't any fun though, because it most certainly is. This game plays amazingly well. Whenever I play this one, I play the stages in order. Each one has its own sort of kookiness to offer and they're all extremely fun. But my favorite has got to be the advanced level, or Dinosaur Canyon as it's named. Not only is the level design super cool with you racing through, well, canyons, but it also has my favorite song in the game. It's all so silly you just can't help but love it. Not only that, but Sega AM2's name is mowed into the grass, though you can barely see it here. And who doesn't love the Gallop Racing Hornet's ass twerking for you the entire race? I was always a little disappointed that the car stayed completely dark inside this tunnel, even when passing through the bright parts, but oh well, it still blew me away more than anything had on the 3DO at the time. This stage even had a little hidden area for you to find that showed off Sega's sense of humor. I do kinda suck a little at this game, but that doesn't mean I don't have fun each and every time I play it. And nothing says Daytona USA to me more than Dinosaur Canyon.
When I ran across KO Flying Squadron 2 for the first time, it was nothing like I was expecting. First released in Japan in May of 1996, this never had a North American version. Instead, a number of PAL regions got it later on that same year. Coming from the Sega CD original, I was totally expecting another shoot 'em up, and while this one does touch upon that, it is mainly a character-driven side-scrolling action title. I love this game, and you could easily pick just about any stage here as your favorite. It's all loaded with fantastic visuals and sound, but it's the aquarium stage that really knocked it out of the park. This was a showpiece for the Saturn's two-dimensional abilities. You get full screen transparency acting as water, and then you get additional transparencies throughout the area. Sprites are impeccably animated, from your main character right down to the smallest of enemy. The music set the mood of tranquility and danger at the same time, a potent emotional combination. The cool part is that KO2 had already mixed up the gameplay quite nicely at this point. You had platforming, shooting, vehicles, and then bam, right into an underwater adventure. It felt like the developers were trying to show the world what the Saturn could do and why two-dimensional gaming would never die.
I mentioned also getting Panzer Dragoon on the Saturn's US launch day along with Daytona. You may be wondering what my favorite stage in this one is. Or maybe you're not and you just wish I'd shut the hell up and go away. Choosing my favorite in this game is kind of a tough one. Stage 1 is amazing, and I had never played anything quite like this before. The outstanding orchestral music as you play makes it tremendously difficult not to be blown the hell out of your chair. Flying inside of the building to continue the battle is also pretty cool. And honestly, the boss fight isn't too bad. Here's a tip though, blast it by rapid firing on it instead of locking on again and again if you don't want to be here all day. Overall, this is an amazing intro stage. But still, Stage 2 has got to be my favorite. These giant-ass sandworms that dive in and out of the sand are amazing beyond belief, especially back when I first experienced this. Playing this stage, you realize that games can be every bit as epic as movies. I remember my friends watching in awe as I let them play this game that same night I got the Saturn and they all came down to take a look. I must have had like 5 different friends over that day. The music here, while not orchestrated, is still excellent. It changes up and gets kind of eerie when you enter the cave. You eventually fly through to the exit. Then the music picks back up and you battle more sandworms. I love how you blast off parts of their protective shell and then continue to shoot them. The stage ends with a super fun boss fight which has some excellent sound effects. The first 2 stages, especially the second one, is what I feel sold a lot of people on the Panzer Dragoon series. It sure as hell sold me on the Saturn. I did not regret buying the console one bit on the surprise launch day with games like this and Daytona.
Since Joe went the Panzer Dragoon route, I'm totally gonna swoop in and steal Panzer Dragoon 2. This one dropped in early 1996 and is the sequel to one of my favorite games on the Saturn. It had so much to live up to, and boy did it pretty much nail every category. So many killer stages to consider, but I have to go with episode 6, The Battle with Shellkoof. It opens up with you bearing down the spine of the massive vessel. Enemies attempt to hold back your advance, but you are a perfect war machine, and you can't be stopped. After laying waste to the outer defenses, you enter the enemy stronghold, killing everything that even attempts to advance on your position. Back outside, you cripple the ship further, blowing huge pieces away before heading back inside to continue your onslaught. Your final maneuver is to hit the nerve center of the ship and bring this adventure to a close. There's so much here to say. This is the battle you had wanted since the opening stage. Your village destroyed, finally you'd have your revenge and see this bastard brought down. I love the visuals. The open sky, the sheer size of your adversary, the way you surgically cripple it during your attack, the entire area looks and plays out so well. Of course, every Panzer musical track is a winner, and this one plays out quite fitting to the on-screen action. I could go on all day about how impressive this was, but I have a feeling most of you already know.
Galactic Attack is a great shooter from Taito that was brought over by Acclaim. In Japan, it's known as Layer Section, and this is my favorite game in the series by far. You have a normal shot as well as an auto-targeting system similar to but not exactly like the Panzer Dragoon games. The entire game is fun and quite challenging, but my favorite has gotta be Stage 2. You start out in space, then you go inside of the moon that looks like it's been sliced in half or something. It's awesome. But I appreciated this stage more once I tried what the game calls arcade mode. This presents the game in a, vertical mode where you need to tilt your TV on its side. The arcade game, of course, was designed for this. Because of the way the horizontal raster effects work, many of the effects in the game essentially had to be completely remade for the normal Saturn mode. Playing the game in the arcade mode restores all of the original effects. Now when you enter the moon, it looks like this. Check out that nice curve-like effect. I don't know, can you tell a difference between the two modes? The entire game is full of effect differences like this, but to me, Stage 2 shows it the best. Plus, it's a hell of a fun stage anyway with great music. Well, pretty good music anyway, probably the best in the game. This shooter just doesn't get enough love.
The beat-em-up genre was sadly quite weak during the 32-bit generation. That made releases like Guardian Heroes all the more special. Released in early 1996, this was a multiple-path, multiple-plane beat-em-up adventure with multiple playable characters and endings. That's a lot of multiples, and it meant there was so much here to see and do. The entire trek was fascinating thanks to the different heroes you could choose with different abilities, not to mention the way the story went through twists and turns depending on your decisions. My favorite route took me to level 28, Warrior in the Light. Without spoiling too much, you have decided the Sky Spirits are the true enemies, and hit them with everything you've got. You are immediately beset on all sides by enemies like magicians, ogres, and laser-equipped robots. These guys mean serious business and are capable of doling out crazy damage. Fortunately, due to this being late in the game, your powers are more than ready to return the favor. The screen stays filled with attacks from everyone. Whether it's lasers, ice, wind, lightning, fire, and everything in between, this battle is almost too much for the Saturn to handle. You even have multiple boss fights to contend with, so don't get cocky once you see that first cinematic. This game was filled with killer action, and this right here was the best.
Astal, wait no that's not right, Astal from Sega was an outstanding display of 2D power that showed up fairly early in the Saturn's life. Sega was kind of hurting for software at the time, otherwise this one might not have made it out in North America simply because it wasn't 3D. Well, I'm sure glad that it did. I made sure to buy it right away, as the pictures I saw on GameFan blew me away. And look, I even cut something out of the magazine. I wonder what that might— oh yeah, I remember now, the game originally had no spine label. There's no shortage of amazing 2D graphics in this one. It's an interesting game for sure, and aside from a few wonky sound effects and control that can be a little weird sometimes, I like it quite a lot. With so many impressive stages, which one is my favorite though? Well, it's gotta be Stage 1. It was absolutely mind-blowing the first time I play it, and I still love playing it today. It really shows you that there's no need for 2D to go anywhere if it can look this damn good. The colors are outstanding, and I'm convinced that this was all hand-painted on separate layers. No repetitive tile-based nonsense here. Obviously, the parallax scrolling is amazing. You have foreground graphics which are slightly out of focus, which gave an even more impressive sense of depth. The screen even zooms out a couple of times to show you that handling all of this is child's play for the Saturn. And of course, the music is just as epic as the visuals. This impressed a lot of my friends back then as well. If only the games industry in general would have been kinder to 2D games, we could have seen more stuff like this or even better.
I feel pretty much exactly the same about Astal. This was an early Japanese release my friends and I imported after we got our Japanese Saturns. It had been out for half a year by this time, and man, we were hungry for titles. To see this two-dimensional spectacle was exactly what we needed. Huge sprites, multiple layers of gorgeous parallax scrolling, and more colors and transparencies than you could ever hope to have in a game like this. I could easily nominate every single area here just on artistic and technical merits alone. It's that damn pretty. But when I think about just one, it has to be Sea of Clouds. What a stage! This is Astal jumping platform to platform, enemy to enemy, set against a beautiful scene of moving clouds at the bottom of the screen and a spinning vortex above you. And like any memorable stage, it's all set to music that adds an emotional weight to everything your eyes are taking in. Just look at that. Visuals like these not only validate the sheer power of the Saturn, but it also makes you wonder what this platform could have done with 3rd and 4th generation two-dimensional engines, had polygons not warped everyone's minds at the time. Imagine a Shinobi with this much care, a Streets of Rage, a Comic Zone, a Ranger X. The way two-dimensional games were treated in the second half of the 1990s likely robbed us all of some truly excellent software, and the world of gaming is darker for it.
One of my favorite import shooters is, well, I'll let the game pronounce it itself. I took a chance on this one back in the 90s because I'd never played a Parodius game before, so this one has some nostalgic value to me. Don't get me wrong, it's still an outstanding game even without the nostalgia. It's just so crazy and weird. This one is always yelling things at you in Japanese, which makes it even more absurd, and I love things that are absurd. You can choose from a wide variety of kooky ships to control, but I always choose the Vic Viper for some reason. There are a ton of excellent stages in this one for sure. The candidate for my favorite has gotta be Stage 1. The music is some of the best in this title, and overall it does a great job of introducing you to the game. But my favorite has gotta be the game's second stage, which takes place in the school. There's just so much to unpack here. At the start, you've got 1950s or 60s style punks with multicolored pompadours giving some other kid a hard time. Then you're fighting enemies who hammer on the pen's buttons to shoot at you. Once you make it into the very large bathroom, you can freely move up and down while shooting Easter Island heads with makeup. When they blow up, they turn into hula dancing penguins. Or maybe even a penguin with a flaming guitar. Once you get outside, there are girls who are floating in bubbles for whatever reason, and they're blowing you kisses, except that these kisses are deadly. Naturally, one of them is a pig that sneaks up from behind you. Blow her up and she turns into a ham. Aww, she just wanted to be loved. The stage ends with a boss fight consisting of two gigantic anime girls with a very phallic rocket. The music in this stage is great as well. Whenever I think of this game, this is the first stage that comes to my mind.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Favorite Levels on the Sega Saturn. I think you all know by now that with my love of this platform, I could easily do this 2 or 3 more times. So many memories, so many great games, and such an important time in my life. I'd also like to expand this topic to my favorite moments in strategy and RPGs. They typically don't have stages like you traditionally think of, but there are some scenes that I'd like to cover at some point. I'd also like to thank Joe for stopping by and lending his help in making this video possible. If any of you guys haven't subscribed to him yet over at GameSack's YouTube channel, he makes excellent content and is highly recommended. If you would like to see more of this type of thing, let me know down in the comments. Now that I have covered the Genesis and Saturn a bit on this topic, I think next time I'm going to branch out to a non-Sega console. I have loads of ideas, so look for that one in the not so distant future. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.